Hey, it's Chris from Northern Scales Reptiles, doing another little animal video. This is another really popular pet. This is a bearded dragon. Especially with Christmas coming, bearded dragons have been extremely popular. People have been like asking for them and about them literally constantly. And it makes sense because they're really good pets. They don't get massive. This one's actually one that just came in. And when they're young like this, they are insect eaters, but they'll also eat a lot of like veggies, fruits, leafy greens, things like that. They have a higher protein requirement when they're younger than when they're older. So when they're younger, you give them more in the way of insect feeders and things like that. And then when they're older, you can go back to more vegetables. More vegetables than insects, but I still do recommend keeping insects in their diet. These are extremely prone to some health issues like metabolic bone disease. That can happen from a lack of ultraviolet B lighting, as well as a lack of calcium and D3 supplementation. So this is one of those lizards that we absolutely recommend keeping ultraviolet B lighting on them, as well as a heat light, or you can do a mercury vapor bulb and do both at once. They do require slightly larger enclosures as adult, probably about 120 gallon, which is a 4x2x2 enclosure. I don't necessarily recommend going the route of a glass tank for those. If you buy an acrylic enclosure from like Cages, Dubia, or Wisconsin Custom Cages, you'll get a better price, and it'll all around be better for the bearded dragon too, because they're lightweight. You can put them together yourself. They've got black sides, it's a little more insulated, and they don't have big screen tops, which is kind of cool. So, bearded dragons are fantastic. They do require hotter temperatures than some other lizards. Want a hot spot to be between about 110 and 120 degrees. The ambient temperature on the cool side, you'd want it to be in the mid 80s. That way they can still thermoregulate and they can go to the hot spot for metabolizing food if they'd like to, but they'll have a spot where they can cool down too. They don't tend to drink out of water dishes and you want to keep humidity fairly low. I do recommend still putting a water dish in with them, but you can also just provide leafy vegetables and give them soaks in a warm water bath every now and then. When you do that too, they sometimes will defecate in the water, so it's kind of like potty training them. Even when they're new here, they're fairly handleable. More so than almost any other lizard that we have. I would say that they're kind of comparable to like maybe an African fat tail, if you know how I feel about those. They're just really easy animals to hold. They're okay for kids too, but I always recommend some parent supervision. When they're older, they do get a little bigger. I would say, typically less than 2 feet, 18-ish inches. I'd have to look up exactly what like the common answer is to their size, but they're fairly large. And even at that point, they're still fairly easy to hold, as long as they've been worked with. If you have a fairly skittish one as adults, which I've seen quite a few times, they can be a little trickier, but still not that bad. So, enclosure setup, I recommend, like I said, keep it warm. They're diurnal, so they're going to be out and basking quite a bit during the day. So make sure that you've got the lights on. Make sure that you've got a temperature gun and you've got a way to regulate the temperature in the enclosure to make sure it doesn't get too hot and definitely not too cold. Keep humidity fairly low. Make sure to provide a water dish though, and give them access to a bath that they can swim in with supervision, maybe once a day or once every other day. And they should do fairly well. I'll show you some larger ones too that we have in the store right now. So this is one of our rescue bearded dragons that came in from somebody who could no longer care for him. It's pretty healthy overall. I would say his legs look like he might have the slightest bit of the start of MBD, which is metabolic bone disease from a lack of ultraviolet B lighting or calcium and D3, but honestly, I don't even know that for sure. It honestly doesn't look like he's doing very bad. Typically when that happens though, you'll see some like puffiness in the legs, and he does have a bit of that, but overall, he's also kind of thick, so it could be that. The way that we've got the enclosure set up is pretty simple. Got a heat bulb over here. We have our ultraviolet light up here. And this is one of the acrylic enclosures from Cages, and it is the 4x2x2 with the sliding glass doors. We've got some wood branches that he can climb up on if he wants, but he still has a couple hide spots. We have a hide spot closer to the warm spot and a hide spot more on the cool side of the enclosure. This being more of a stone material kind of helps with claws and stuff as they like dig around. And one big important thing too, we do use this mulch type substrate instead of sand, and we find that that's a little bit safer for them impaction wise. So yeah, and we have a little water dish here too. So here he is, and this is about how big they get when they're adults. He's fairly large. He's probably about 16 inches long, I would say. And he's active, he's fun. He'll come and watch us as we're in the storefront too. So I'll kind of step back so you can see how large this enclosure is. So pretty big, but still fits into, you know, the decorative style pretty well if that was something that you wanted to add to your home. And like I said, these acrylic enclosures are definitely the way to go. They work better for this type of animal. They're so much more lightweight. Like a 120-gallon glass aquarium, I could never lift it, but this I loaded into my car, brought here and set up by myself, and it was really no issue at all. So yeah, if you're interested in a bearded dragon, it is important to know that this is what you're going to be looking forward to. Fairly large lizard. They're not going to be the tiny ones like that little guy. They are going to grow up, and they do grow fairly quickly. They'll be closer to that size. And then shortly after, you'll have this. To go over lighting real briefly, these Arcadia heat lamps, the halogens, the floodlights, and the spot lamps will go into one of these domes or one of the lamp holders, and then you'd put a heat cage over it just to keep it safer if you have an acrylic enclosure. And that's going to be the lighting that you're going to use for heating. For ultraviolet B, you're going to want to use something kind of like this Zilla Desert fixture, which is going to be 10.0 ultraviolet B, or you can use one of the, you know, Repti Suns or one of the UVB hoods too. Any of those will work, but there is a difference. You definitely need both bulbs for this type of animal. It's not something where you can get away with only having one unless you use a mercury vapor bulb. If you do that, they're all included. So that's something to keep in mind. Might be a little more cost effective to do it that way, but if you do, I would still probably recommend putting in a UVB strip. Whenever you're using heat, you're going to want to have thermometers. You're going to want one in the cool side and the hot side so that you can monitor the temperatures. You can also use a temperature gun, which is what we do here. That way we can go through and check the temperatures and make sure that everything is sitting where it needs to be. As long as you do that and you can make sure that the temperatures are where they're at, that's perfect. And if you want to go a little bit further, you can always do one of the thermostats, either the ReptiTemp or the Vivarium Electronics. Me personally, I like Vivarium Electronics. They've got a probe built in and they'll help you monitor the temperatures and make sure that they don't go too high or drop too low. And they'll keep everything kind of right where it needs to be. Substrate wise, cocoa husk would be great. Inexpensive and easy to clean, as it says. Orchid bark will also be okay. I recommend something with slightly larger particles that'll be dry. That's really the catch. If you have something that's too dusty, like the Coconut Select, which that's good for a lot of animals, but it's definitely not good for bearded dragons. And of course, the sand products, that's definitely not what I'd recommend for them. I do recommend a larger, harder to accidentally eat material for those. So definitely stick with the larger chunks. And most pet stores should have them. We definitely do. For hides, really anything will work. These are nice because they kind of work to help kind of slowly over time trim down nails just because they are a little bit rougher texture and aesthetically they're pretty pleasing. the water dishes that they make kind of match. They work out really well for bearded dragons, and to be totally honest, a small dish like that for water would be fine. You will want to have a dish for greens and vegetables too, so something a little bit larger and flatter like that would work out great, or maybe even the Repti rocks. When you've got that, you'll want to supplement the diet with a calcium supplement like the Calcium Plus. You can also use Supervite because that'll be really good for them. They do make some pre-packaged diets like the Bearded Dragon gourmet food. We have them in case somebody needs them in a pinch, but to be honest, fresh food's much better if you can help it. That's what we definitely would, recommend instead. Rapacia also makes Beardy Buffet that you can make and then you can pre-package and have ready. You can even keep it in your freezer for a short period of time and you can offer that too. But again, even though I love Rapacia and it's a really good company, fresh food's where it's at. All right, and then larger sturdy branches like Mapani wood and spider wood will work out really well for climbing materials in the enclosure. You can use other things as well. You can even maybe source your own wood and then boil it or bake it to make sure that there's no pathogens or anything like that on it. But honestly, if you get something from pet stores, usually the hard part's already taken care of for you and it's ready to go. So make sure that there's a lot of climbing materials with larger, thicker branches, kind of like these, because the bearded dragon will utilize that. All right, well, hope that helps. If you're interested in getting a bearded dragon, feel free to stop by our storefront. We can help you out and show you all of the products in person, let you check them out in person too, maybe even hold one, see if it's a good fit for you. And as always, my name's Adam, this is Diamond. You're watching wrong channel. This is Chris from Northern Scales Reptiles. We haven't named this guy yet, but you could. Give us a call if you need us.